Well, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Phelps Stokes. Thank you, Funke, Princess. And I'm quite honored to be here sharing the table with Nick and Jean-Patrick. I'll start by saying a few facts about Africa. Why I established Afro Lahar was specifically to brand Africa, to change the perception of Africa, Africans, through cultural products, cultural events, programs, and also bringing support and capacity building to certain organizations, businesses, and also independent artists, specifically photographers, filmmakers, and musicians. So Africa today, $1.74 trillion of Africa's GDP, $860 billion combined spending in 2008, 52 cities, more than 1 million residents, 20 African companies with revenues over $1 billion. Africa tomorrow, between 2020 and 2050, $2.6 trillion of GDP, 1.4 trillion consumer spending in 2020, 1.1 billion working age Africans by 2040, 128 households with discretionary income by 2020, and 50% of the population will be living in the cities. Why I mention these stats is because we need to be aware of where the population of Africa is going, how we should be engaged, and we should all partake in the development of Africa presently, specifically Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, African Union and other organizations have identified 350 million Africans outside of the continent. Just in the US, there are 40 million Africans with a purchasing power of $400 billion a year. Just that, if we take it, it would be, in a single country, make it one of the 15 largest countries in the world. Now, what is the childhood education and how is it relevant in this context? First, we need to define what's childhood education. It's a formal teaching and care of children by people outside of their family surrounding. Therefore, it would be in an educational system. When we talk about education with children, we have to take into account the cultural context and language. Language is eminent because most of the education is presently in English, and often enough, most of African countries have their own native languages, and so even to translate the books into each and every ethnic languages, it would be costly. So now, we have to be able to reconcile the discrepancies between native languages and English language. As they say, language is a powerful tool to enhance cognitive development, which is the information processing. Can we do mind mapping through doing associating words? How are we able to address the need of African children who need to process information, new information, because we're in the 21st century, ICT is present. Right now, NEPAD has an e-learning program that tries to put 52 countries, 52 main cities of Africa through e-learning so they can educate children through e-learning. Now, I'm going to skip a few things, but in grassroots philanthropy, I would like to talk about grassroots philanthropy. What is it? This is defined as a spirit of goodwill towards humanity, usually expressed in human welfare. This concept is not new to any of us, because one of it is in recorded history is Plato. He established his academy with an endowment that lasted 900 years. Major religious groups have the thing called zakat for Islam. They have agape or caritas for Christianity, the zedaka in Judaism, and dana in Hinduism, and etc. In Bahaism as well, there are so many other religions that have the spirit of giving. Modern times, we have charitable foundations. But the most important one is recognized as the grassroots charity of individuals and small groups to raise money for worthy projects. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of Philanthropic Venture Foundation. Mr. Somerville wrote a book called Grassroots Philanthropy. Here he addresses for foundations on how to identify individuals that are scalable and that would have somewhat of a high impact philanthropy in any projects or initiative that they would engage. He suggests finding people doing important work such as Nick, such as Jean, and some of you that are here, or should I say all of you that are here, embrace risk, high risk. Childhood education is investment, long-term investment with high impact. We should focus on ideas, not on problems, because often enough ideas are solutions. I would like to also mention that there's a transformative philanthropy. Transformative philanthropy comes from an experimentalist. This experimentalist has developed the necessity of culture and consciousness. Why culture? Why I choose to talk about transformative philanthropy is specifically because Africa is a cultural continent. And we need to understand when we go into Africa with whatever projects and tools that we're about to bring it, we need to understand and respect the culture of the continent. So, transformation of culture would aim to help emerge strongly needed new elements adopted of culture and address the core itself. And transformation of consciousness would aim to free and facilitate the natural development of consciousness away from fear, isolation, and self-concern towards greater expansion, inclusivity, and care of others. Now I get to answer how grassroots philanthropy can positively impact children. Africa has the youngest population in the world. Today in sub-Saharan Africa, there's 130 million children below the age of 6, which is 20% of the total population, and they are all at risk. There are many factors behind that, as we know. There's war, AIDS, overcrowding, food supply, all the bad that we've heard, the negative promotion of Africa. But as a result, the entire generation, 130 million children below the age of 6, are ill-prepared, physically, mentally for school, and the basic rate of education of Africa is thereby deemed inefficient. I'm not sure if some of you know about Mo Ibrahim, who's a Sudanese-born entrepreneur who's also a millionaire in telecommunications and other projects. He says that Africa is underpopulated. We have 20% of world's landmass and 13% of its population. We have a bulge of young people, and that brings to the marketplace a huge workforce. Whereas Europe, population is aging, where the birth rate is at 1.2. We need to focus for Africa on education and training. Going back, so what is the return on investment for philanthropy? It's high impact, long-term investment. The laureate Nobel Prize winner Heckman, who's also an economist, argues that investment in children bring higher rate of return than investment in low-skill adults. How important is it to recognize that we need to invest in our children? A healthy cognitive and emotional development in the early years translates into tangible economic returns. Early intervention yield higher returns as a preventive measure compared with remedial services later in life. Sub-Saharan Africa is projected to stay that way for decades in terms of youthful population. In 2050, the continent is expected to have 349 million people aged between 15 and 24. 29% of world population compared with 9% in 1950. Now, solutions, and my colleagues will provide even more solution, and Nick will have a concise program to give you as a solution. The solution, I say, is give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him a lifetime. Therefore, the importance of having children, confidence building, and academics. Confidence building, where does it come from? We need to entice African children to love themselves. Confidence building comes with children that have their own stories, meaning that they're reading books from their African authors. They're playing with dolls that are Africans, African doll, African materials that they can connect to their own identity. Teaching a native language and learn as an additional language English. Now, I started school in French. It was mandatory to speak Amharic and to learn Amharic. By middle school, I was obliged to learn English, and from middle school to high school, I was obliged to choose between German and Spanish. By the time I graduate, I speak 4 languages. All of them all the 3 main languages, I was obliged to write a dissertation, and each one of them had to be evaluated by a panel. That's how we should educate our African children. Teacher training, salary. We need to compensate our teachers. We need to be able to train them. Not only necessarily the African diaspora that are extremely skilled, speak 2 to 3 languages, exchange programs with teachers, bring African teachers here and get them to immerse within the society, American society, that are extremely advanced and modernized, to be able to understand one another in exchange of knowledge. Capacity building, or why not build on already existing schools, extending and expanding the infrastructure. We don't need to open schools just one beside the other. Why not go to the rural areas? Yes. Why not help the already existing school in expanding their curriculum? Why not refine their curriculum? Why not build libraries with these schools? Because they're already on the ground, have been operating minimum 10 years. So community building models, I couldn't find, unfortunately, I looked and looked, but there's one Swedish non-profit that is opened in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. That is a model that should be replicated. It houses 1,000 kids, and what it teaches them is from farming to products to cooking to sewing. So even to sustain themselves, everything that is farmed is sold. They prepare lunch and sell between 11 and 1 o'clock, and everything that is sold, the revenue is re-injected in the schools. So these girls, once they graduate, it's mandatory to give back to the school that has given them that opportunity. So educational institutions need to rethink their missions and to restructure their courses, community outreach, and campus operations. So one last thing that I would even think for us to discuss is in China and in Korea, they have their own small little computers where it does direct translation. You see, when they don't understand an English term, they're able to put it in and it gives them in their own native language. We Africans have not even been able to develop such application. That has been existing within the Asian community beyond 20 years. And I leave it to Jean. Thank you.